Welcome y'all! Have you ever wondered how much damage IDs and EGOs can produce? How much Upties are worth? Is Rodion still the DPS queen? To answer those questions, I organized the data and calculated the maximum damage that every ID and EGO can do with every skill if all the conditions are fulfilled. And for the fun of it, put them into an easy format that you like, tier lists. Now, the system can be complex and hard to quantify, so I did make a few rules. The maximum damage of each skill includes the coin values, with any bonus modifiers included, calculated according to the non-combat mechanics. If status increasing or decreasing damage are applied during the skill, they will be taken into account for subsequent coins. Same for damaging statuses, like Rupture or Bleed. For IDs, skills are multiplied by their number to calculate the damage that it can do in one skill rotation, so 3 for skill 1, 2 for skill 2, and 1 for skill 3. However, as a few notes, skill bonuses are not taken into account for next skills. So for example, the bonus damage from the gaze from the one who grips Faust is not taken into account as it is inflicted on the last coin of its own skill. Damaging statuses are assumed to be at 0 before the skills for calculation. However, any threshold for conditions like 6 plus button count is considered as filled. ID's passives are also not taken into account. Offense levels are also not taken into account in this video, but I will probably add columns in the document, as they can add up to a 16% difference in damage. Probabilities are also not taken into account because that's a whole other can of worms that I'm not gonna open. Also for this reason, for poise IDs, I decided to not count hits as being critical hits, as poise with ego gifts can be obtained with any ID, even if unlikely. However, to still give them the credit they deserve, I treated on-crit effects as on-hit and crit damage bonuses as damage bonuses. As a small disclaimer, those lists do not take into account infos like synergy and should not be taken too much into account when evaluating IDs or team building, as some IDs have lots of requirements or do more damage with status stacking. Most, if not all, data I base myself on comes from the Limbus Company website. Anyway, I enter into more details for specific skills in each section, and all details about everything shown in the video can be found in the document located in the description. If you spot any mistake, you can comment on it, after double checking. So first, here is a tier list for IDs at Uptie 4. In notable positions, there is a number 1, Spice Bush Yisang, with a skill 2 able to inflict massive amounts of damage by being AoE. Also, we have Ting Tangonglu able to do huge damage if the targets are at low health, and even if Corp Sinclair is third, he is the one with the least amount of conditions for his damage. Outside of that, Ishmael still is the strongest 2 stars ID with some crits, and Otis the strongest base ID, reaching the 150 damage threshold. On the other side, the lowest 3 stars happens to be Blade Lineage Yisang without crits or his passive, or else it would be Corp Meursault, with Vice Sinclair being the lowest 2 stars and Base Ishmael the lowest base ID. Let's review the IDs sinner by sinner. First, Yisang. His numbers outside of Spice Bush are on the lower sides. Even if he gets only critical hits, his Blade Lineage ID barely does not reach 150. However, this does not take into account his passive, which does boost his damage by about 40%, putting him close to BL Sinclair, but it is hard to set up. Spice Bush has some incredible numbers if his skill 2 hits different targets, however some of his damage is also unlikely. Most of all, he does not get enough tremor count in one skill rotation to trigger the AoE on skill 2 times because of tremor count reduction at the end of the turn. Tremor sucks. Or sucked maybe, as the newest announced Mola Otis ID fixes that, making the Spice Bush AoE dream barely possible. Next, Faust has really low damage, even on Corp, barely, though the coins are okay. This is mostly due to the fact that her IDs are more support oriented, like Grip Faust Gaze status being a pretty good damage increase for her whole team, including herself, meaning that she has more damage than the calculations seem to show. Meanwhile though, 7th Faust came out, with it being a very strong damage based ID, as long as Rupture conditions are fulfilled. Don Quixote is known for a W Corp ID who actually does not have the best damage in the game, but has really easy conditions for her to deal her max damage. In comparison, Sangdon can have the same damage output, but the conditions for it is getting so much clashes, 10 each, it is unlikely. Meanwhile, her 2-star IDs are not very worth talking about. Neither is her base ID. Ryoshu is a high damage based character with supportive abilities. While her only 2-star ID, being more support based, is an exception, her base ID is on the stronger side, and 2 of their 3 stars can go over 250 damage, the Chef ID taking into account the max damage from missing HP. A Kurokumo ID is also more support, but can still dish out some nice damage. Meursault has never been known for its damage and it shows. However, burn stacking can lead to high damage, making it stronger than its 3-star IDs. For W Corp, the defense level down is counted as 5% increase per 2 levels, but it can vary a bit. Anglo is something. His base damage is pretty good outside of his support IDs, and Kurokumo and Ting Tang can have some of the highest damage of the game in their tier. However, Kurokumo conditions are close to non-existent, while Ting Tang needs low health enemy, but can be triggered easily on broken enemy parts for insane damage. Mutilate is more unlikely though. Heathcliff does not have the best damage IDs outside of 3 stars, even if Uptie 4 gave his She ID better numbers, but his 2 stars are more focused on support. However, his 3 stars IDs are also some of the stronger ones. R-Corp has very few requirements, but can barely last more than 1 rotation. Meanwhile, his Sunshower ID is way trickier to use with negative coins, but can actually output as much damage. The 4 fragile on R-Corp S3 is still nice though. Also, Sunshower's counter does more than his skill 1, which can increase the damage. Ishmael has a lot of IDs right now, and has both some of the lowest damage IDs of their tier, with Sloshing our base ID, and some of the strongest, with She Ishmael having the not so tricky condition of low health, Molar having some nice numbers, and Liu having already high numbers, without taking into account previous burn proficiency or count for dead ones, which adds a lot more. Rodion is average overall. Raw spawner conditions are very hard though, like other Trimmer IDs. A Kurokumo ID does not have incredible numbers, even while critting. Sinclair is pretty interesting, with 2 stars IDs having pretty good damage, outside of Vi being the lowest 2-star, and bringing some utility, especially red sheet, for whom talisman damage is taken into account. Molar's skill 3 does more damage without the Tremor count by the way. His Blade lineage is the strongest of the 3-star crit ID on Uptie 4, and N-Corp Sinclair needs as little introduction as requirements for his insane damage. Otis has few IDs, and with it little requirements and damage. The funny thing being that her base ID does more damage than all of her others, being the strongest base ID. Finally, Gregor requirements are pretty high for not that high damage, especially on his G-Corp ID. His Leo ID, however, can do quite a bit, but needs a bit of burn support. Next, let's take a step back, or rather an Uptie back, as we quickly check the list at Uptie 3. Overall damage does decrease for the majority of IDs, with the top 3 being the same, but the order is somewhat respected, except for some that did receive a lot of buffs, but more details later in the video, where I'll compare the difference directly. Now for the second part, EGOs. For EGOs, there is no skill rotation, so damage is just separated into awakenings and corrosions. Other than that, the rules stay the same. I could not really put them both in one tier list, so I did one for awakenings and one for corrosions. Well, 2 for each rather, because I made one for maximum damage, where they would hit the maximum number of targets, and a per slot based one for comparison. So without further ado, here are the tier lists for Uptie 4. First, the awakenings and corrosions for max damage. In those two, the egos with the most attack weights are higher, but still a few ones, even with less attack weight, can still do impressive damage. The most impressives are Rhymeshank, with sinking stacks for very high in one shot, on up to 3 targets, Ryoshu's Force Match Flame, which does incredible damage to burned enemies, and Capote Meursault, whose very unlikely Tremor burst conditions can inflict massive amounts of burn. More in the details, but before that, the per slot based tier list. In these ones, the more attack weight based ones do tend to fall down, letting a few egos shine, and notably Yisang's Dimension Shredder, which under the right rupture conditions can deal massive amounts of single target damage. Meursault's Capote and Ardor Blossom Star don't really have the right values, as their effects can damage opponents out of their target slots, but I am not gonna change it. Let's analyze it a bit more in detail, shall we? Again, in order. So first again, Yisang. His 2 hair egos take some of the best spots from both total and per slot lists, Sunshine having a large AoE accompanied by self buffs, and Dimension Shredder having a big number with large damage modifiers and additional bonus damage. Meanwhile, his other egos are way more supportive based, with Force Smash Flate having the funny property to have a heads effect while doing less damage on heads. Force damage, meanwhile, is not as memorable. Her egos are way more supportive, be it for others' damage, healing the team, or debuffing the opponent. Don Quixote's egos can have some hard conditions of either high lust cost on 7 lust resonance for items 2, or stagger, or not staggered, or panic, or whatever on fluid sac, but if they are fulfilled with the added attack weights, can do some good higher than average damage. Telepole damage does not take into account the rupture inflicted to allies nor itself. Ryoshu is still a damage based character, including her egos, with Force Smash Flame having enormous damage on well-cooked targets. Red Eyes Open does not inflict as much damage, but can be used in more comps, its own conditions being fulfilled by the other version of Red Eyes, more support-oriented. Soda has more potential than her base ego, but costs more and needs more setup and support to work. Meursault is a tank, and that's why he has one of the biggest damage boosting statues with Surgery turning him into a glass cannon, and a hair ego inflicting huge amounts of burn if it can stagger the target. Who wrote this? Capote's condition is to stagger with a Tremor Burst, and demands either burn or Tremor Synergy for this, else the damage drops by about half. Well, Pursuance and Chains of Other are still some of the best supportive egos in the game, with the latter having the lowest damage in the game. Anglu follows back the supportive trail with low damage on his egos. While all have 3 attack weights, no additional damage is present outside of Dimension Shredder Dimensional Rifts, counted as rupture counts, and Land of Illusion sinking, giving them both higher damage. Heathcliff does not have much damaging egos, however AEDD's Corrosion and Telepole attacks are raw damage in exchange for won't be used anyway charge. Ishmael's Ardor Blossom Star can inflict insane burn to everyone with high Rust Resonance, making it very strong in burn comps. Burn to allies is still not taken into account. Capote's Corrosion also has the ability to inflict damage to non-targeted enemies under very unlikely conditions. Because of all that, the per slot damage values are a bit or very wrong. Roseate Desire and Snag Harpoon don't do as much, but are good for clashes with their effects or passive. Rodion has busted egos. After Uptie 4, I suspect Baba Yaga to be an LF, because Ryoshu has no business inflicting around 90 sinking value on Corrosion on 3 targets without any condition, plus having damage modifiers. The base values are also pretty high. Furthermore, Force Smash Flame can inflict nice damage on AoE, and what is cast is almost the most damaging base ego per slot on Uptie 4. This title goes to Sinclair's Branch of Knowledge though, whose rupture and high value makes some nice damage. Meanwhile, Impending Day does not do more damage while having on-kill effect. Lifetime Stew is more of a support, but Awakening can still do nice AoE damage if all slots land on different targets, and Corrosion is still good. Otis Ebony Stem has always been and is still a very strong ego able to inflict high damage in a large AoE. Sunshower and Crit can do high damage, especially with status counts. Without Crit though, which is likely, it won't be as strong. A small parenthesis, I did include the crit damage for this one. Her other 2 egos are okay, but nothing too noteworthy, even if they Odyssey had the purpose. Finally, Gregor should corrode more. Fae Lantern and AEDD gaining more attack weight, and Legerdemain inflicts maggots, which can translate into quite a bit of damage in a few rounds. For AEDD, I assume that all Spark Discharge is translated into rupture count, which is not very likely. Before going into some fun use of this data, a quick look at the tier list for Threadspin 3 for both Awakenings and Corrosions. I only made the max damage and not the per slot for this one. In those, Ryoshu is clearly not as broken, and the lack of attack weight can be felt overall on the values. So finally, what can we do of all this? Well, not much, because as I said, a lot of the game is about team building and synergies. However, comparing the values of tier 3 and 4, we can try to make an estimation damage-wise of the value brought up by tier 4. So without further ado, here is a tier list of damage difference between Uptie 3 and Uptie 4. I will not enter into details on every sinner, but overall a few do benefit quite a bit. The obvious ones are the pose IDs, who gain critical damage effects and better coins, not even counting the passive changes. Outside of that, W Corp Ryoshu does gain a lot of damage, mainly on SQ3, and Sank Dawn's additional damage increase on clashes can add up quite a bit, even if it can be hard to fulfill. Surprisingly, Ting Tang Gong Lu does gain quite a bit of damage compared to other very strong IDs like W Corp Dawn or R Corp Escliffe, however the bleed requirements make it hard to rely on. Spicebush Yisang's skill 2 additional coin do stack up in AoE, G Corp Gregor hits Rupture even better, some burn IDs gain some nice damage or burn, W Corp Meursault becomes usable, etc. Again, this list does not take into account some nice benefits like R Corp Ishmael charge consumption or overall status infliction increase. If you want more info on a per skill basis, the document is still in the description. For EGOs, the differences are even more noteworthy, for both Awakening and Corrosion. First and foremost, Rhymeshank and Ryoshu Force Match Flame gain all the damage buffs, status infliction and attack weights, making them the biggest winners. On the known one though, Dimension Shredder does not get a lot of benefits, already being strong at Threadspin 3. A lot of the IS changes are from attack weight gains, mainly for Outer Blossom Star, Lifetime Stews, Dawn's Fluid Sack, or Sun Showers. I don't have a per slot tier list, but if you want the stats you can check in the document. On Awakening, Meursault's Capote does gain a lot of damage, followed by Ryoshu's Force Match Flame and Rhymeshank, and then X Snails with a cursed damage bonus. On Corrosion it is about the same, except for Capote, but Otis Sun Shower does get some nice damage. And that concludes this video. As a final message, this card is coming back to the series, and that means that in a 6 skill rotation, you might get 4 skill 2 and 2 skill 3, which is fun, and I did put it that way in the notes. Raid Whale is gonna test our nerves for a while still, and it being 2 months long might allow us to test some nice new comps with upcoming IDs with our mirror dungeons. Maybe Tremor will actually get good? In the meanwhile, I will keep updating the doc for a while, and I might have another idea for another video, soonish or later-ish, focusing on the other side of the damage coin, spoiler, tanking and defense. In any case, thanks for watching and try to keep your sanity high in this slow descent into the inferno.